All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another edition of our Franchise Your Business podcast and webinar series. My name is Tom DuFore. I'm the founder and CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team. And I'd like to thank you for joining us again as we open up our live session and people are starting to load into the session today. Well, we have a ton of information to go through. And if you are new to us or it's been a while since you've joined one of our sessions, our format for the structure of our conversation really flows through. We like to start at some high level macroeconomic data and slowly move down to some deeper, smaller microeconomic data focused around franchising and small business. So we typically have small groups attend. So if you have a question, comments, ideas, things you have, I will make sure to leave some time at the end, or feel free to type your message into either the chat box, raise your hand, or into the Q&A. One of those ought to work to get us connected. And with that, I will go ahead and leave a message. Oh, I would be remiss if I did not suggest at the start here, if you have not subscribed to our podcast, we have two different podcasts. This will be replayed next week on the Franchise Your Business podcast, available on just about any podcast service that you listen to. Again, Franchise Your Business podcast, as well as our YouTube channel, which is bigskyfranchiseteam.com. And finally, I'd love for you to subscribe to our Multiply Your Success podcast, Multiply Your Success. We have over 200 episodes on that and have recently had Brad Sugars, the founder and chairman of Action Coach International, which has 1,100 franchises in 83 countries, share his story about how he started his business and went from zero to getting his first 100 franchises sold. Really cool story if you're into something like that. Again, that's Multiply Your Success podcast, any of your favorite podcast channels there. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this data. I don't know about you, but I am pretty pumped to get this going. So the first report that I always like to start with is the Institute for Supply Management, ISM, and this is their homepage that you can see here. And we take a look at these three reports. We look at the manufacturing PMI, the services PMI, services PMI, and the hospital PMI. I'm just getting over being sick here. Energy levels back, but still a little congested. So anyway, the first up is the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index. It's the manufacturing PMI, and it says the U.S. manufacturing sector contracted for the second month in May as the manufacturing PMI registered 48.7%, down 0.5 percentage point compared to April's reading of 49.2%, after breaking a 16-month streak of contraction by ending in March. And so as you can see here, a reading above 50% is the manufacturing economy break-even line. So you're above that manufacturing. If you're below, well, then it's below that break-even. And then the overall economy break-even line is 42.5%. So when manufacturing starts getting close or dipping close to that, which it's been relatively low, it means that things are not great. They're not terrible, but they're not great either. And so it's kind of this kind of flat type zone here that we've been in with manufacturing. And manufacturing tends to be a leading indicator of where we're headed economically. That's why I like looking at this. It's generally showing us 12, 18, 24 months out. This is kind of what we're going to be seeing in the economy, which to me says kind of more of the same of where we've been. Next up here is the Purchasing Managers Index for the services economy. Now, the services economy is services in our economy is the largest driver to our economy. We are a services-driven economy in today's world. It says in May, the services PMI registered 53.8%, a 4.4 percentage point increase compared to the reading of 49.4%. A reading above 50% indicates the services economy sector economy is generally expanding. Below 50% indicates it is generally contracting. So a services PMI above 49% over time generally indicates an expansion of the overall economy. So we're over that 49% for that overall economy. I saw a big uptick last month for the month of May. So positive sign, things with a big uptick, but we'll see what happens. Is this going to be sustaining? Is it going to just be a surge? What is happening there? What are we seeing for the report in May? Remains to be seen. We'll have to check in next month when we take a look at this. But you can see over the course of 2022 on this chart, it's a steady downward trend. 2023 was kind of zigging and zagging, so some of these big swings. And as we're almost halfway through 2024 now, you can kind of see the swings are up and down, just not as frequent so far this year as they were in 2023. You can see that the trend lines they're showing them pretty obvious. Next up is the hospital PMI, or Hospital Purchasing Managers Index. And it says in the second paragraph, the hospital PMI registered 58.4% in May, a 4.9 percent point increase from April reading of 53.5%, indicating a ninth consecutive month of growth after a contraction in August of 2023. So you can see that the hospital is trending up again, and showing that it's growing pretty steadily right now. This is the newest report through the Institute for Supply Management. So just something worth noting. And we've seen that it tends to be some big swings here, which I think may have some connection or to maybe some seasonality to people catching a cold or the flu or something going through that's cycling around. I think there may be some play into that as well. So what do we make of all of this, right? So why even talk about this? Well, when I look at this and you think about franchise prospects that are calling, inquiring, or thinking about starting a business, what this says to me is that, and how you can communicate this, franchise prospects, or even maybe franchisees in your system, might be a little wondering what's going to happen with the economy. Where are things going? It's up, it's down, it's kind of in the middle. What's happening? Well, to me, when I look at this, hospital upswing looks pretty good. We see this past month an upswing in services, and we see in manufacturing a downswing. Well, this is kind of a little bit of a mixed bag. From my perspective, it just means a little bit more of the same, which is the sentiment I've heard from our clients and others in the business community, that while there are a lot of positive signs, there are also some things, there's trepidation about trusting those positive signs when we see things like the manufacturing dipping a little bit and some zigs and zags from the services PMI as well as the hospital PMI here. So just some things that show, to me, kind of in the middle is where my take on these three pieces here. Okay, let's add the next piece of information into this, which is the unemployment rate. And this is from the tradingeconomics.com, the United States unemployment rate. And it shows that for the month of May, it was 4%, and the month of April was 3.9%. So it was a jump up 1 point. And it reads here, the unemployment rate in the United States rose to 4% in May of 2024, the highest since January of 2022. So almost a year and a half. This is the highest reading we're looking at here. January of 22. No, I'm sorry, almost 2.5 years. The highest reading, up from 3.9% in the previous month, and surprising market expectations, which had forecasted the rate to remain unchanged. The number of unemployed individuals increased by 157,000 to 6.649 million, while employment levels went down by 408,000 to 161.083 million. Meanwhile, the labor force participation rate dropped to 62.5% from 62.7%, and the employment population ratio decreased to 60.1% from 60.2%. All this to say that while there are critics of the general unemployment rate, because it only takes into account the total number of people actively looking for work, so it does not take into account the people that are not actively seeking employment. Nonetheless, it still shows an increase. So, what does that mean? Well, it means more people are looking for jobs. That's an uptick. 4% as a whole is still not bad unemployment rate when we zoom out from that. If we were to zoom out at the max unemployment rate on this chart here at Trading Economics, dates back to 1948. You can see the unemployment rate here. There's a trend line here at 7%. You see lots of times it's been over 7%. Lots of times it's been over 6% here. So historically, though, if we're at or around that, under that 5% number, looks like you're under 5%, a smaller percentage of the time. So, when we zoom out and look at where we actually are comparatively to where things have been over time, you start to see, well, it's not, long term, not as big of a deal. So if someone's wondering about that, a couple aspects of it is still relatively low when we look at a broad perspective. And number two, what that means at 4% unemployment is, well, if you're looking for people are looking for jobs. And, one of our reports here for a small business report showed that the number one issue on small business minds is employment and finding staff. So if there are more people looking for jobs, hopefully that means there are more people available for you to choose from to find employment. So that's another perspective and vantage point to be thinking about or looking at with your franchisees or prospective franchisees. Next up is the inflation rate. Certainly top of mind is inflation. Inflation in May of 24 was 3.3. It's up at 3.3%. So it's 3.3% over where it was a year ago. And so 3.3% is still a growing inflation rate. It's down from the previous month at 3.4, which is down from March of 3.5. It's still not down to where it was at the start of the year in January and February, but nonetheless, we at least see some of it cooling down a little bit, but we're still over that 3% mark. Okay, so it says the annual inflation rate here on tradingeconomics.com for U.S. inflation rate says the annual inflation rate in the U.S. unexpectedly slowed to 3.4% in May of 24, the lowest in 3 months compared to 3.4% in April and forecasts of 3.4%. Inflation eased for food, shelter, transportation, and apparel, and prices continued to decline for new vehicles and used cars and trucks. On the other hand, energy costs rose more, namely gasoline, utility gas service, and fuel oil. Compared to the previous month, the CPI was unchanged, the least since July of 22, compared to forecasts of a 0.01% increase, and after a 0.3% rise in April. Ultimately, what does it mean? Well, to me, when we're taking a look at this and talking to our prospective franchisees, it's the same thing I've been talking about for the last several years, which is it costs more money to borrow every month the franchise candidate waits. So if your franchise candidate has made the decision that they want to buy your franchise, and my suggestion is just have an open, transparent conversation. Have you decided that you want to buy this franchise? It doesn't mean you have to do it now, but if you have decided, you might even just say to them, if they don't want to share with you, that's okay as the franchise seller. But if they want to share, if you want to share, if you've decided, Mr. or Mrs. franchise buyer, if you've decided to buy our franchise, inflation is here, even at 3.5%, 3.3%, 3%, whatever it is, every month you wait, the value of the dollars in your checking account are worth less. 3.3% less this month, 3.4% less last month, 3.5% less the month after. And it compounds over time, that the value of your money just continues to shrink. And so if the franchisee is looking to do it, the value of their current cash is decreasing, and the cost to borrow money is increasing, and it's increasing because the dollar buys less now than it did a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago. And with interest rates where having gone up, albeit historically not at a high number. It's just been over the last 15 years, people have become accustomed to near 0% interest loans, right? Very, very low interest, less than business loans, less than 10%, home loans under 6%, under 5%, 4% under that. I mean, talking very, very historically low numbers, and people got used to it and accustomed to it, and so you're battling against that if you're having to borrow money, or if a franchisee has to borrow money. So make sure you're communicating that to them, and I would have that open conversation that if they have decided, as I was stating earlier, Mr. or Mrs. franchisee, if you have decided that you do want to buy our franchise, or any other franchise, the sooner you make the move to do it, the better, for getting your dollar to stretch as far as it can, and to put those dollars to use to start, hopefully, taking the cash that might be sitting in a low interest bearing savings or a checking account, or to be able to borrow the money and put it to use to start seeing a return on that capital, in opening and operating the franchise. And it's just it's not to force a decision or coerce, I should say, or you do not want to coerce a decision. It's just to help them make that decision, because they might be worried about it. Well, what about inflation? What about, if I do this and costs go up? And the reality is, whether they do it or not, the costs are going up. That is not changing. Even if let me look at this. Let me look at the maximum here, and you can this dates back to 1924. Okay, you can see price change, the inflation rate changing. Okay, it's almost always going up. The blue is an increase in monthly inflation, year over year inflation. There are only a few times where it actually dips down, right? So, I mean, very, very few times. We had the, look, when was this? In February-ish of 2015, June of 2015, we had the financial crisis, '09, then we're all the way back to the 50s, right? 1940s, the Great Depression. I mean, for most people who are going through this, it's happened once or twice in their lifetime, for a blip, just a little period in time. So the point is, it's going up, and it's going to cost more to borrow, and the dollar is going to go. It's going to not go as far as it had the month prior, and the month prior, and the year prior, and so on, because of inflation. So it's just a very matter-of-fact conversation. Okay, I'll move on to the next point, because I think I've been on this one too long. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at the Index of Consumer Sentiment. So this is put out, the Survey of Consumers, which is put out by the University of Michigan. I'll just click on the last 50 years to take a look at this, but you can see that it fell down this past month, but overall trend since 2023 has been a nice trend upward. So it bottomed out. The lowest it had ever been was back here a year or two ago. Let me look at the 10-year to see if I can get the actual year point here. Yeah, it was back in 2022. And you can see this nice steady trend going upward, back to numbers that we were, early to mid 2020. So kind of hovering around a number we were about 4 years ago. We fell down a little bit last month, but you kind of see this upward trend. It kind of goes up, and then it drops a little bit, and then it goes up again and drops a little bit, up a little bit more. But generally, you can see a nice little trend line forming here that's showing that it's generally going up the last 2 years. Which is positive. What does that mean? What does that mean for your franchisees? Well, it means that the consumer is generally feeling a little more confident about buying stuff and making purchases and doing things. So it's coming, that consumer, she's coming out and buying stuff. He's coming out and doing things and investing or buying things, okay, as part of it, which means that it's probably a little bit easier for your franchisees to grow their business, to add customers, to go through that. So those are positive signs. Or if you're in franchise sales and marketing, it's probably a little bit easier to sell franchises now than it was a year ago, and a little bit easier than it was 2 years ago. Okay. And about the same that it was maybe in right around the 2020 time window, based on this consumer sentiment here from 4 years ago. Okay. These are daily new COVID cases, just 7-day moving average. Well, let's see. It looks like it was last updated a couple months ago. So anyway, we'll move forward. Okay, new business formation statistics. Okay, this is from the U.S. Census Bureau. This is from census.gov. And I always like to take a look at the total number of new business applications. And as you can see here, there were almost 424,000 new business startups or new business applications filed across the United States in May of 2024. Yet again, over that 400,000 new business startups. And I just like to draw a comparison. In pre-COVID numbers, we're talking, it had just started to clip right around 300,000 new business startups. Post-COVID, it's been almost every single month for years now. Since 2021, every single month for almost 3.5 years now, it has been over 400,000 new business startups, more than a third. It's close to 40% increase. What does that mean? Well, if you're in franchise sales, that means people have startup on their mind. They might not be doing it. They might not buy your franchise. They might start another business. They might not actually do it, but that idea of entrepreneurship is on the hearts and minds of prospective franchise buyers and just the general populace, in my opinion, on the hearts and minds of the general American populace, where they're saying, I think it's time for me to take control of my own destiny, be the master of my own ship, or captain of my own ship, and start to move forward with this. So I think that's worth noting. All right. This is from guidantfinancial.com/small business trends. And this is small businesses of 2024. I just think it's worth noting what's worth a couple things worth noting to talk about. Where are they seeing these small business trends in 2024? Well, the top states are Texas, California, Florida, and Georgia. As we take a look at this, the types of businesses they're starting. So tying back to this 400,000 from census.org, 400,000 plus new businesses. Well, what are they doing? What are business owners doing that are coming through the Guidant Financial, which Guidant, by the way, is a lender, a broker, a lender. They help people secure loans to start businesses or buy businesses, and they share what kind of business types are people starting. Well, according to Guidant, 27% of their from their survey are new independent businesses. 31% bought an existing independent business. 32% bought a new franchise, and 10% bought an existing franchise. So that means in total, 58% bought an independent business, 58%. And then we have 42% are buying some form of a franchise. And to me, that's a high percentage. I think franchising, that's a very high percentage that's coming through. So number one, to me, what that says, if you're looking for someone to help out with franchise loans, Guidant might be a good resource because they've got a lot of franchise information and data. That's a high percent to me that I see there. That's worth noting. And then what are the top industries that they're showcasing? Well, their industries they're showing are 16% retail, 13% are food, 12% health, beauty and fitness services, 9% residential and commercial services, 8% construction and contracting. And then it shows you the total amount of loans that are occurring. Less than 4% or 4% is under 50,000, 27% is a range, a loan range between 50 to 175,000 for a startup cost, I should say. 15% 175 to 250,000. 27% ranging between 250 to 500,000. 16%, 500,000 to a million, and then a million plus is at 13%. So it's a nice little summary breakdown of what we're seeing. And top plans for 2024, increase staff. So we had talked about that earlier about people going through that. So anyway, worth taking a look at. Okay, let's take a look at franchiseinsights.com. And they produce every month the Small Business Startup Sentiment Index at franchiseinsights.com. And this was released on June 5th, 2024. I know we're at the tail end of the month here. Wanted to get this in here. But we can take a look at this. It says the heading reads, aspiring business owners see near-term startup conditions staying about the same. 88% say business conditions the same or better in 3 months, but political concerns rise. And that probably makes sense given that we're getting closer to a federal election for the president coming up here in November. Certainly makes sense. Well, what are we here? I guess 5 months or so, or 4.5 months. It's coming up pretty quick, I guess, away from that happening. So we can take a look at that. I'm going to scroll down to take a look at a couple of items. And one I like to look at is it says 82% of the survey respondents said that they expect their startup to occur within the next 12 months. So the green line, 30% of the people said they expect to start their business in the next month, 19.3% in the next 2 to 3 months. So if we add those together, that's roughly 50% of the survey respondents said that they plan to start the business in the next 3 months, the next 90 days. So if you're in franchise sales, franchise marketing, you must assume that the person is half of the people you're talking to are looking to start that business or buy that franchise in the next 90 days. So you have to assume that they're looking to do it now because, 50% of the time, you're going to be right. And now meaning the next 90 days. So I think that's worth noting or paying attention to. And then the balance are looking at 4 months plus, but 4 to 6 months out is 22% or 23%. So if we added that together, that's over 70% of the respondents said that they're looking to start a business in the next 6 months. So assuming that they're looking to make a decision to start a business, buy your franchise, I think that's a fair assumption to make. You don't want to use that to put undue pressure, right? Again, we're not trying to pressure someone into it, but I think going in with that assumption that they are looking to do this now or sooner rather than later is a fair assumption based on this data. And your marketing message, by the way, if you're in franchise sales marketing, you may want to change some messaging on your website just to reflect that something that says, if you're thinking about franchising now, or you'd like to accelerate your pathway to business ownership, check out our franchise fast track or something like that you can take a look at to how they can accelerate their pathway to starting. Maybe give an option like that or explain how they can do it a little bit faster some way. Okay, next thing I really like to talk about is this question here that gets asked. It says, which of these factors will have the biggest impact in the next 6 months on your decision to start a business? Number one factor continues to be and has been for many years funding or access to credit. Almost 60% of the respondents said that's an issue. So when we look at that, you ought to have a solution for them. You might not provide in-house financing, but have some third-party lenders that you can at least refer them out to see if they can help them get a loan. Or maybe tap into a retirement rollover of some kind. Almost 35% of the people said economic climate. Well, tuning into a session like this helps you to be informed so that you can apply some of this information to your business model in particular. How does this impact your business? And maybe go a step farther to look deeper into your own industry. Go to your trade industry trade journals or your industry association and see what's happening if you're in pet services or home services. See if there's any trends in your industry that you can gather that's being shared. Almost 20% of people said political changes. So those are the top three. And 20% political changes in an election year, a presidential election year, I should say, that always tends to be a concern. That people get concerned about the closer we get to the election. People think the sky's going to fall, whomever is elected president. And, at the end of the day, it generally, the economy does what it does. And typically there's not this big fallout. There's not a big fallout whenever new president's elected or reelected or whatever ends up happening on that. So, things that tend to maybe have a bigger impact are some of those local rules and local regulations that may impact your business. So paying attention to those certainly important. So those are the big factors to take a look at. And then the age group, just like to showcase. So baby boomers, for people looking to start business, baby boomers accounted for 28.8% of aspiring business owners. Gen Xers accounted for 38.8%, the largest share. Millennials accounted for 27.5%, and then Gen Z accounted for about 4% of the people looking that responded in this survey. What to take out of that? What I find interesting is the resurgence of baby boomers. It passed the millennials here again for a second month in a row. And, boomers had kind of had slowly declined. And it's, the last couple of years slowly increased in numbers here. So I just find that interesting and worth noting. Okay, next up, let's take a look at a couple new reports. One that was just released by the Franchise Insights. This was published by Michael Alston for Franchise Insights on June 26, 2024. It says franchise interest resumes migration to the South and East for franchise development. I'll kind of zoom in here. So they did an assessment to look and see, well, where are people opening franchises? And this is a year-over-year change. So the brighter green it is, the growth, there's growth in the change, meaning that's where interest is occurring, and the red means that interest is shrinking. So you can see the bright red here with Florida and California. So those are two of the big changes here, and some of the biggest positive changes are Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and Texas. New Jersey, it looks like, and Texas are a little growth share of 2024 inquiries. And then we have a decline here for California and Florida, some small decline there in terms of interest. But you can see the overall percentage share on the right side of total inquiries. So still Texas, California, Florida, as you'd expect with large populated states, very high percentage of inquiries still that are going on. So anyway, just worth noting, if depending on where you're looking for franchisees, just some of the changing interest. One of my favorite statistics that gets published, this was published here June 19th in a survey that was done in April of 2024, it looks like. And they published this Franchise Insights, and it shows that just over 38% of on average of franchise inquiries that come into your franchise brand, 38% on average are looking at just your brand. That's it. One concept. So it's asking how many concepts or franchise brands is it one prospect inquiring about. 17.1% said they inquired about two concepts, and 10% said that they inquired about three concepts. So what does that mean? Well, if you add it all together, that's 65.2%, almost exactly 2/3 of people that are looking at three or fewer franchises that they're looking to buy. And if you look at that, just out of that just out of those three, the highest number there is a single concept. So that means approximately 4 out of 10 leads that come into your franchise system, they're looking at one franchise, they're looking at yours. And approximately 2 out of 10 that come in are looking at yours and one other. And then 1 out of 10 is looking at your brand plus two others. So that means it's a small, most candidates are looking at a very few franchise brands. And so I think coming in under the assumption that the franchisee is only looking at yours, your franchise system, is a pretty safe assumption to make based off this data. They're not looking at hundreds. They're not looking at even 10. Most of them aren't looking at 5. They're looking at 3 or less. So I think just keep that perspective in mind, that chances are you're competing against either the franchise candidate buying your franchise or no franchise. Okay. And so that is our session for today. I know we ran a little long. Thank you all for hanging with me here. I'd love to see if there are any comments, thoughts, questions, ideas here before we close out for the afternoon. All right, I'm not seeing anything come through. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Hopefully you picked up a nugget or two that can be helpful and useful in your franchise efforts. Thank you for being here. We'll have another session next month in July to do a very similar talk through of what's going on there. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. And if we will not have a session next week because of the 4th of July, so we won't have a webinar. So just want to say happy 4th of July. Have a wonderful, safe celebration to celebrate our Independence Day and our just great nation here in the United States. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon.